be starting officially in just a minute. Joined again here, my colleagues, Gail, Gitcho, Sean, and we're excited to talk about last night, project a little bit forward into the next debate, and again to take your questions. Welcome, everybody watching on any streaming platform where you're able to see us. Mark Halperin, Sean Spicer, Gail, Gitcho. Folks, we're going to talk about last night and what it means, and we're going to take your questions. If you're watching here with us on Zoom, you can raise your hand, either your physical hand or better, your electronic hand. Let us know you'd like to join and ask a question using your own image and voice. No AI here. If you want to submit a question by text, you can do that too using the chat feature, and we'll take questions in both formats in just a little bit. But again, if you want to join us here on the Zoom, if you're watching live, you want to ask a question, just please raise your electronic hand and let us know what you want to ask about. Gail, I want to ask you, first of all, the most hackneyed question in all of post-debate analysis: who won?
Donald Trump, without question. I don't think that anybody did themselves any favors. They didn't jump any polling points for being the alternative to Trump. I think that, Trump was not named very much except for at the beginning and the end, and there weren't very many candidates that were willing to take on the argument of why them and not Trump. Yeah.
Sean, name a candidate and what their strategy
Can I answer the question? Can I answer the question?
You can. But I just want to know if you think anybody had a strategy too.
Yeah, I think they had a strategy, but I think the winner last night was Iowa. And I'll tell you why. I think what last night came down to was proving that if you don't beat the only people that I think have a fighting chance in Iowa are DeSantis and Haley. If neither of them does really well in Iowa, and I mean within definitely less than 10, if not even better, then the race is over. I used to say up and through New Hampshire, because Christie had a shot. I think last night Christie sounded very good, but I don't think he's going to grow out of that. My point is, everything now comes down to Iowa. If you don't win Iowa, it's over. Donald Trump becomes the de facto nominee. So did anyone have a strategy last night? I think Vivek tried to. He came in. I mean, you saw right out of the gate, I'm going to punch the moderator in the face, the RNC in the face, and then I'm going to hold my third punch to go after Nikki Haley. I was chatting with Gail earlier this morning, and I just, while we're waiting for this to start, and I said, tell me if I'm wrong, but the mini focus group of people that I texted with, all women, found how Vivek handled himself to be very turn-offish. And I think the heels comment, the doctor's comment, and you can argue with the merits of it. I'm not here to say whether in fact, I think his answer on TikTok was horrible. But the reality is that I think he turned off more people than he picked up. And he went back to debate one strategy, which is just punch people in the face. And I don't know why, but I thought every time I heard him go, I get that probably sound good in prep. Not so good.
I'm not sure how it could sound good in prep, though. Like, to me, that's a strategy, like saying, what my strategy for having fun today is? I'm going to get in the car with a baseball bat, and I'm going to drive down the street, and I'm going to knock over the first 10 mailboxes I see. That's the kind of strategy he had. It was just to get attention.
Yeah, but Mark,
to get a thrill.
And Gail knows this. When you're in prep, it's all your supporters, and the boss comes in and goes, "Hey, I got this idea. What if I come after Nikki?" And I say, "Oh, that's awesome, boss. Great idea." So prep is not the best place always to get honest feedback.
But just stay with him for a second, because he's the only one. I mean, DeSantis had a bit of a strategy to try to act like a human being and to talk about real people, which I want to talk about in a second. But for Ramaswamy, who clearly went more back to what he was in the first debate, let's say he executed it perfectly, and he sort of did. He knocked over all 10 mailboxes. Mm-hmm. What's the theory of the case of how that brings you votes? Because as you said, and as I think all of our intuition is, that's not a vote-getting strategy for a lot of voters. And so what's the point? What was he trying to do?
Look, Vivek is a sensationalist. He is going to say the thing that is going to get him the most applause by the people immediately in front of him, or the people that are going to be in front of him in the next 10 minutes. That has been his strategy from day one. It is sensationalism. The difference between him and Donald Trump, because we see this from Trump sometimes, but Trump has the base to spin that. They have the base to support it. Vivek does not. And that's why it falls flat. But also, I thought it was interesting, staying with Vivek, as you say, that Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis were both his top targets. And neither one of them punched back because they probably said in debate prep, we're not going to punch back. I'm not going to acknowledge that because why? He said 4 or 5%. So it would be punching down for me. And to Sean's point about prep, when we're doing debate prep with a candidate and the candidate walks in and says, guys, I got this great line. The people that are in that room has to be honest with them and say, I don't know if that's going to land the way that you think it's going to land. So maybe we try to say it this way, or we, think it through. So either there's no prep like that exists within that campaign, or nobody told him to not say what he said.
Or he didn't care.
I mean, it's pretty obvious. You don't attack a kid, somebody's kid, no matter how old they are. It wasn't going to land.
I just don't know that he cares either. They could have told him. I'm not sure that's the smartest tactic. He seems to think that he really has a better radar. But to Mark, your question, I think part of this has to do with the fact that he has always wanted to be seen as, I'm basically Donald Trump. I mean, that's his message. I'm Donald Trump without the court cases. And so it's like, see, I can punch the moderator. I can talk about the establishment. I can go after these guys. I'll say what you think I should say. But I don't have the baggage that Trump has. That's the shtick.
Yeah, right. But he also doesn't have the base to support it.
Right. I get it. I agree with you.
It's a great 4% shtick. I want to ask you about DeSantis. We'll talk in a second about the next debate, which you all have information on that I think most people watching don't know yet. But the next debate's in December.
Yep.
I don't know if there'll be a debate before Iowa. I assume there will be. Maybe there'll be one in Iowa. But that's like 50 days away. How could it be that Ron DeSantis, who just got the endorsement of the governor of Iowa, and whose whole campaign now is based, as Sean, as you said, of coming within 10 or less of Trump in Iowa, how could he not have mentioned the endorsement? How could he not have figured out a way to work Iowa in? Does that make any sense to you guys?
I actually thought the only person that did a good job of mentioning Iowa was Tim Scott when he said on that question of Social Security, for so many people in Iowa that work as farmers that don't have to have jobs like you and I, Chris. And that was the most relatable thing he said, because for so many people who are blue collar workers or farmers or people who work on their feet all day, sitting behind a desk is one thing to get to 65 or work an extra year, but there's a lot of people whose bodies have just had it by the time they get to that age. And I think he acknowledged, and that's the key. This goes back to why I said the big winner was Iowa last night. Tim Scott, at least in that one moment, acknowledged the fact that everything comes down to Iowa. But I was with you. I was like, dude, where is everything, when they got asked the question about how many ships in the Navy, it should have gone back to defense industrial activity in Iowa. Anything that they could have made a connection to, the number of service members that come from the Midwest, whatever it was. Ask me what I had for lunch. Well, when I was in Iowa. But I think that they missed an opportunity to connect to the only voters that matter right now. Maybe New Hampshire for Chris Christie, but the reality was they blew all of them. And I agree with you. Most importantly, DeSantis, an opportunity to tie back to the caucus goers of Iowa.
And if it weren't, go ahead, Gail.
Well, I was just going to say, it was definitely a missed opportunity. But what I assume happened is that his campaign said, we're in Florida. This is your state. This is where you can brag about all of your accomplishments and how you differ from Donald Trump. But that didn't really happen either. So the venue didn't much matter for him. It certainly didn't give him a boost. But for him to not talk about Kim Reynolds and Iowa and farmers and all of the issues that those caucus goers care about, that was a mistake.
If he hadn't gotten the Reynolds endorsement, I think after last night and Haley's performance, I think the voices in the party saying, everybody else get out, it's all about Haley, would be louder. I think the Reynolds thing is the only thing that's still having people talk about this as a two-person race for second, right? That's the way most of the framing is now. It's a two-person race for second. But what's DeSantis's claim to that at this point? He's his poll numbers are same as hers, or a little bit better in some cases, but it's the Reynolds endorsement, and yet nothing.
Yeah, I wonder how she felt about that last night.
Yeah,
I think that's a great question. I actually was very shocked. I know that she's always been inclined to endorse DeSantis. I was actually shocked she came out and did it the way that she did. Not just that she did it, but she went on NBC and sort of took punches at Trump. And I'm like, I was, yeah, that's a whole nother story. But I was actually, and I agree with you, Mark, I cannot believe that he didn't lean more into this, because that's it. If they don't do well in Iowa, and frankly, I've said this before, I think that DeSantis, the number of Florida legislators at the state house that Trump has, I think it was 5 that he flipped this week. He's peeling away at the political base that DeSantis has, and he still has to be governor when this is done. He's frankly embarrassing him to get things done throughout the rest of his term. And if he ever wants to have a political career after this, run for the Senate, run for president again, he's not doing a great job of maintaining any kind of political power.
Yeah, and he's punching against a Trump operation. I mean, the press releases they put out yesterday, the tweets they put out were so personal. They were so just scathingly personal about DeSantis. And he's just standing up on that stage talking about what he talked about. All right. Again, if you want to ask a question, raise your hand. We'll bring you into the conversation on camera if you'd like, or you can submit questions in the Q&A and we'll get to them. I'd love for you two to talk about the next debate, just because, like I said, I think most people don't realize it's now scheduled for the first week of December. Gail, tell us what you know about what
well,
the RNC
I
saying.
saw it was announced this morning that it's going to be December 6th in Tuscaloosa, and it's going to be hosted by 3 women. Megyn Kelly from SiriusXM, Elizabeth Vargas from News Nation, and Eliana Johnson from the Free Beacon. So I think that'll be really interesting. It's a bit of a shakeup, and I think they were smart to announce it this morning.
Sean, you and I have talked about this notion of kind of a format more like this, bringing in different conservative voices. What do you think of this lineup?
I think it makes sense. I think it's going to assuage a lot of concerns. Last night, I tweeted this out. I thought Hugh Hewitt's questions were fantastic because they made sense. They resonated with people on a variety of issues. Gail had brought up some great. I mean, we know what Hugh's going to talk about, generally speaking, but he really, I thought, took folks, got folks to answer.
I'm sorry, I got to push back on that. I respect you, and I think his interviews are excellent. But what's the point of asking for the exact number of ships? What is the point of that?
Because I mean, so I'm sorry. I think that's a massive issue. How serious are we about combating
the issues? The issue's massive, and asking about building up our sea capability is a great topic. But this fetish about the number is just the framing of it.
I think he wants to make sure that people know what a good number should be, or with all due respect, I think that's why he asked about the nuclear triad on his show. They want to know, did you study?
But here's the point. I think that asking for specificity gets you to understand, are you a serious person or not? If you can just throw out the fact that we need more ships, here's how big China's Navy is becoming, here's how small ours is becoming, here's the threat in the Indo-Pacific. I don't think that he needed 397 ships as a number. I thought actually Chris Christie hammered it home really well. He didn't give him a number, but he talked about the importance of the submarine fleet to combat and protect Taiwan.
That's a great discussion.
But my point, Mark, is that it's not about assuaging every Republican voter. We haven't had a serious conversation about our capabilities, our military capabilities vis-a-vis China and protecting Taiwan yet. I thought, did I want an entire debate about that? No. But the idea that one question went to make these guys think seriously about what it takes to protect America in this new emerging geopolitical world, then that was important. And I thought, was that what I wanted to hear for an hour? No. But it made me understand, are you a serious candidate or not? Have you thought about our national security? And are you aware of what we have and what we don't have and what China has? So I know we're getting off topic on that, but I actually thought that at least we had one question that made them seriously think. And I thought that his follow-up, it wasn't about the number. It was how you answered the question. And the idea of going off on a tangent about some random thing made me think, to me, you don't understand what it takes to protect America. That's how I heard that.
I agree with you on the topic.
It was asked, but Hugh Hewitt's questions were tougher for the candidates than
I agree with that.
Kristen Welker and Lester Holtz. And I got to tell you, I was impressed the way that they held those candidates to the time and the audience to the applause and all that. I think that it was a very well-run debate.
I want to ask you something about the way it was run, but first I want to make a point about the process. A bunch of them said they'd ban TikTok, and you can't just say you're going to ban TikTok. It's on tens of millions of phones. So I would have liked there to be some accountability for that, to not just sort of get the applause line. Yeah, I'll ban it. I think that's a flaw in the process. I want to ask you both about a rules change.
Well, I'm sorry. Hold on. First of all, I get your point. There's a follow-up as to how or whatever. But I want to know, again, this gets back to, I'm so tired of us talking about the threat that China poses and politicians doing nothing about it. As someone who cares about this issue, I liked the way it brought out. Again, it's like the question that he was asking. It wasn't the number, it's how you answered it. And the idea that Vivek Ramaswamy can sit there and talk to us and lecture candidates about how serious China is as a problem, and then tell me that he's going to put TikTok on his phone that threatens the national security of our country, that spreads pervasive messages to the youth of our I'm sorry, I looked at that and said, boom, that's what I needed to know. So I get sometimes the question is more than just the question. It's how you answer it and how you bring in the bigger issue at stake. And I thought in both the Hugh question and in the TikTok question, I learned a lot.
All right. I agree with you mostly. But my point is, though, there has to be ability to drill down more. Four people saying they'd ban TikTok, but no explanation of how. To me, as someone trying to understand where they actually are, is meaningless. We're going to bring in Wes to ask a question in a second. Again, if you want to come in, raise your hand. But I want to ask you guys about the rules change. Last night was the first debate where if your name was invoked in a negative way, you didn't have the automatic right to respond.
Yeah.
And so you had people just sitting there while oppo, sometimes false oppo, was thrown in their face. Do you guys like the change, or do you think the moderator should have some discretion at least and exercise it more to bring people in to respond?
I think they thought they couldn't control it because we've seen what's happened in previous debates where people
never
say,
ending.
He brought up my name. I get to respond. So it was an interesting way, but you still got a chance to see when the candidates attacked each other with oppo, false or not. They would shake their head and say, that's not true. You saw their campaigns come out with responses to that. Now, it's certainly not as effective as being able to stand on the stage and attack back. But you only have 5 people on that stage, and the smaller field was good for most of them. So you had Nikki and DeSantis going after each other, which is what we knew was going to happen. But they had these really small arguments, and the responses were really small. You did this with your economic development. You did this with, China in South Carolina. The arguments, either they weren't good or they didn't land. And so I don't think that having the ability to rebut the attack was very important, because a lot of people just couldn't keep up with the oppo that they were dropping on stage. The campaigns should be dropping that oppo instead of having the candidate on the stage try to use it as the tip of a spear. That's why we have ads. That's why we have, that's called air cover. So you put that oppo up. If you have enough money to be able to drop oppo on your opponent, you do it through an air war and not on a debate stage. So I don't think it much mattered. It's the campaign's jobs to be able to refute that. So it didn't. The rebuttal part didn't bother me.
I'll keep this quick. I thought that was the most substantive debate last night. I thought they answered questions the best. I thought that they did, to the extent that they needed to. You saw Nikki Haley say, you know what, I got to get back to that last question. They used it. They used the rules to do it, but it was less chaotic and less of a food fight, more substantive. I enjoyed watching that more than the other two. And I can't believe I'm saying that from an NBC debate.
All right.
Well, it was more substantive. The policy, and I'll just add this quickly. The policy piece of it was great. And we hadn't seen that before in any of the other debates. We'd seen more of a personality debate than a policy debate. But I don't think that it matters. Yeah, we saw that Chris Christie and Tim Scott were very presidential when it came to policy, but they didn't do anything to distinguish themselves from Donald Trump or Joe Biden. I mean, that's the part that was lacking.
5 hours or 2 hours, 5 candidates. To me, the whole story of the campaign's right there. These 5 candidates had a chance, ample time to speak, and they weren't able to change the dynamic. We want to bring you all in. I want to see if Wes, who asked a question by the chat, would like to come in and ask by voice. Wes, would you like us to bring you in and let us hear from you? If so, please bring Wes in.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. I don't know if y'all can hear me, but
we can.
Okay, great.
Thanks for joining. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And my question for the panel is, real talk. Does anyone on the panel think that it's not going to be Donald Trump? And if it isn't Donald Trump, what type of occurrence has to happen to change the trajectory of the race? Thank you.
I'll go first. I think, I'm north of 90% right now. Something has to change that's big. I think the confluence would be, as Sean alluded to earlier, you win Iowa either numerically or symbolically by organize, get hot at the end. If DeSantis or Haley can continue to organize, and she's not particularly well organized in Iowa, I could see the most likely scenario would be around Iowa, DeSantis surges, finishes within 10 points of Trump. Trump looks bad, makes mistakes, maybe some legal development that casts doubt about his electability. And then Haley finishes a strong second in New Hampshire, DeSantis a strong third. And then we'd have to see what would happen. I still think Trump would win. But that's to me about the only scenario, and that's not a very likely scenario. What do you guys think?
I agree with you. I think I've said my piece. It all comes down to Iowa. If Trump wins Iowa decisively, the race is over.
We have.
But what if he doesn't?
If he doesn't, then we play on and we go to New Hampshire, and Chris Christie has to prove. I mean, then again, it comes down to who comes out of there. But it's a slow drip. I mean, I think look. South Carolina is going to be decisive for the two South Carolinians. I don't think Tim Scott or Chris Christie makes the next debate stage based on the criteria that is going to be for this next debate. So, I mean, the question is, can Nikki or Ron DeSantis do something? And that's the X factor. They have to win, and you'd have to then replicate that with a strong showing in New Hampshire. Outside of that, people are on the sidelines right now. There's a lot of donors and a lot of people that are saying, I don't necessarily like Trump, but I'm not going to give to another candidate because I still think he's going to end up the nominee. For those people to get off the sidelines, they need to see a glimmer of hope. And DeSantis or Haley needs to give them that glimmer, and it's probably once and then maybe a twice in New Hampshire.
Right. All right. If you want to ask a question
I do want to say something really quick.
Go ahead. Sorry.
After this debate, we've got the next debate, and then you have Iowa in like 7 weeks. So there's going to be tremendous pressure, I believe, in the next few weeks for candidates to start dropping out. There's a new survey out this morning from the Des Moines Register that says that Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis are each tied at 16. Then you've got Tim Scott at, I believe, 8 or 10. And then you've got Vivek and Chris Christie splitting 8. So, I mean, and Trump is at 43. That's the same place that he was the last time that they surveyed and they released it. So, he's at his peak, I believe. I mean, he's at his ceiling at 43. So if it was one-on-one, you would have a far superior chance at taking him on in Iowa and actually winning. So if the field winnowed, which I don't think that it will, and if there was a scenario where Trump was in such legal trouble that it was going to peel away some of his voters that would then look at an alternative, then sure. But in all logical and likely scenarios, it's still going to be Trump. But I would like to see the field narrow a lot and give the alternative a chance, because that's what the voters want.
Okay. Let's bring in Rich Davis for a question. Rich. Unmute, please.
There you go. Hey, first of all, thanks for all this insight, especially yesterday when we talked about what would be the other questions, and y'all hit the nail on the head. My question is,
by the way, Rich, real quick, Scott Walker's on a plane. He couldn't be here, but he did nail that TikTok question. So kudos to Governor Walker.
Well, good. Who's going to be on the stage in December?
I think
DeSantis, Haley, Ramaswamy.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because you're going to have the same number of moderators as you have candidates, probably.
Thanks.
So everybody gets their own moderator, and
man on man.
Trump's team said last night, as if we had any doubt, that he would not be there. If you've got questions you want to come on and ask, raise your hand. Otherwise, let's read some of the questions that people have submitted. Larry's asking about the ratings. We don't have them yet. We'll have them later today. My gut is they're not going to be very big, but we'll see. It was on a broadcast network. But.
Total side note, and I'm being serious about this. ABC broadcast the CMAs last night, and that actually probably ate into a bit of the crowd. Trump, I was watching some of the online stuff when he started his event in Hialeah. He really timed that to 8 o'clock. Now, the bottom line is, do I think that ate in? Yeah, I do. So it'll be interesting to see how the numbers went. especially on a broadcast channel like NBC.
He didn't have a huge crowd, though. I mean, I looked at the audience, and it wasn't a huge crowd. So I wouldn't be surprised if, neither one of them had great ratings.
Sean, from a mechanical point of view, how could it be that in South Florida, Trump couldn't fill 5,000 seats? How could they let that happen?
I mean, look, it was interesting because I was watching some of the online broadcasting and they were talking about how people were coming from work. I mean, clearly the Trump campaign was trying to work some of the influencers that were out there trying to say that it would have to do with the timing of the debate.
But if the whole point of the event is a Trumpian show of force to say, I own Florida, I can counter program, how could they not figure out a way to get 5,000 people there? They should have bought them dinner in Florida, in South Florida.
Yeah.
It just seems like a weird error to make.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say they're not going to do counter programming on December 6th because of that.
Oh, I don't know. I actually would argue that I would bet you he ends up in Alabama where he thinks he's very strong. I think that to him showing up Alabama, he probably is much stronger than even in Florida. I think they took a little bit of a risk, Mark, going to Hialeah where you were really hoping that the Hispanic community rallied behind you. I don't know. I mean, it's a good question. I don't know. And I watched some of the coverage as we led up to the debate, so I don't know what the numbers were. But I think that the other thing is just, I don't know that they're prepared to do things outside of key battleground states right now.
Again, I'll beat the nail here, beat the dead horse. The whole point of doing the counter programming is to say, I'm the king of the world. You're in Florida. You can't fill 5,000 seats. That just seems like a rare kind of logistical, practical misstep by an operation.
An operation that knows how to build a crowd, an operation that has all of the texting and all of the crowd building resources, and it didn't happen. So I think that was embarrassing.
Here's a question from Rich Melman. At a high level, this debate was watchable, which I found remarkable, even stunning. There were actually 4 humans on exhibit, 80% of the total. Remarkable. I want to ask you about that in the context of DeSantis. I noticed, because it's one of the things I've talked to his team about on an ongoing basis, that in a lot of his answers, he brought up real people, right? He told stories, but none of them are particularly indelible. You two probably can't recall any of the stories he told.
But I remember the one about the Jamaican lady.
Which one?
The one about the Jamaican lady.
The Jamaican lady.
Pro-life answer. However,
and there's the little girl coming back from Israel.
Oh yeah. But so you saw
why don't those stick?
Well, I think that it's his strategy, like his message strategy is very clear. Like when they're in a room talking about what's our message strategy, somebody has told him, we need to make it about the people and not about yourself, because Donald Trump makes it about himself and not the voters. So, I mean, that's just like it's a normal campaign strategy. I just don't think it's working for him, because the question that he got asked, everybody got asked right out of the gate, why you and not Donald Trump? And he started out with an opening statement, and it was going to be, no matter, and I can hear people in his campaign saying it, no matter what the question is, you're going to give an opening statement, because they're not going to, NBC has not allowed you to, within the format, provide a normal opening statement, but you're going to have a closing one. So no matter what the question is.
That opening statement, Gail, was cribbed from Donald Trump. It was like, this is about you, and it's
not about me.
Yeah, I was like, dude, did you just?
But why doesn't?
Well, it's cribbed from every candidate that has ever run ever. I mean, that's just
why doesn't that message work for him?
Because it's not authentic.
Gail, let me ask you, as an American citizen, does Ron DeSantis care about people like you?
Yeah, I'm sure he does. He seems like he does. But I don't care about that. What I want to know is, are you going to keep our children safe? Are you going to keep our border secure? Are you going to keep terrorists from coming into our country? And I am his target demographic. So as long as he cares about the things that I care about, great. I want to know.
I think he was strongest last night when he talked about what he had done in Florida and why. I was like, that's you.
Yeah.
Play for strength. That's the thing about DeSantis. He has a great record as the governor. And I thought exactly what Gail is saying. I felt like when you are actually talking about how you tackled an issue and succeeded, you're playing to your strengths. When you're trying to pretend that you met this, I mean, that's not right. But when he pontificates about some random person, I don't find it authentic. When I hear him talk about, I had this problem, I tackled it and I won, boom.
All right, it's 9:30 Eastern.
I want to know that he is a badass that is going to have very big policies that is aimed at keeping our country safe and the things that I care about intact. That's what I want to know, and that he could actually has a plan to follow through on it. In that way, sure, he cares about us.
All right. Thank you both, and thank you all for watching on whatever platform you watched. There'll be a replay of this, so you can come back on Sean's YouTube channel, share it with all your friends and family, maybe even some of your enemies who you want to make sure are more knowledgeable, so you can fight with them. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you again on this platform before you know it.